The gun was pointed at me. Not by a rival, not by a stranger, but by my own brother. The barrel of the pistol looked darker than the room around it, like a small tunnel that led straight into death. The fluorescent lights above the long oak table buzzed softly, flickering once in a while like they were nervous about what was happening. Around the table sat men who had followed me for years. Men who had fought for me. Men who had bled for me. Now they were silent. No one moved. No one spoke. No one even dared to breathe too loudly. And standing across from me, holding the gun with a steady hand, was the one person I had trusted more than anyone else in the world. My younger brother, Marco. That was the night I realized something that took me decades to understand. In our world, enemies are easy to deal with. But family is unpredictable. Family can destroy you. If you had asked me 6 months before that night whether Marco would ever betray me, I would have laughed. Not just a polite laugh. The kind of laugh that comes from absolute certainty. Marco had always been loyal. Or at least that's what I believed. We grew up in the same apartment on the south side of the city, a small place with cracked walls and windows that never fully closed during winter. When the wind blew through the streets at night, you could hear it whistling through the gaps in the frame. We shared the same room. 2 mattresses on the floor. When we were kids, we used to lie awake at night talking about the future. Marco was always the dreamer. "I'm telling you," he used to say, staring at the ceiling, "one day we won't be stuck in this neighborhood anymore." "And how exactly are we getting out?" I asked. He would grin. "You'll figure that out, you always do." Even back then, he believed in me more than I believed in myself. Our father died when Marco was 12, and I was 17. Heart attack. Just dropped in the kitchen one morning while making coffee. After that, everything changed. Our mother worked 2 jobs, but it was never enough. Bills stacked up. The landlord started knocking on the door more often. So I started doing things. Small things at first. Running packages for people. Collecting money. Delivering messages. The neighborhood had its own rules, and if you grew up there, you understood those rules quickly. Marco watched everything I did. He followed me around like a shadow. One night when he was 16, he finally asked me the question, "What exactly do you do for those guys?" I looked at him for a long moment. "You don't want to be part of this life." He shook his head. "No, I don't want to be part of it." He paused. "But I want to be part of your life." That was Marco. Loyal, fierce, always at my side. So when I started building something bigger, something more powerful, he was right there with me. People think empires appear overnight. They don't. They grow slowly. Piece by piece. Favor by favor. Threat by threat. By the time I turned 30, I had something real. We controlled several businesses across the city, some legitimate, some less legitimate. Protection. Importing goods. Private security contracts. Gambling operations. Money moved through our hands every single day. But an empire doesn't survive on money alone. It survives on trust. And the man I trusted the most was Marco. He didn't like violence. That was never his style. He preferred numbers, negotiations, and quiet conversations behind closed doors. So I gave him responsibility. He handled the books, the meetings, the agreements. He was the calm voice that balanced my reputation. People respected me, but they trusted Marco. At least that's what I believed. Looking back now, the signs were obvious. But when betrayal is close to you, it hides in plain sight. The first strange thing happened during a deal with a group from the docks. One of my men came to me afterward. "Boss," he said, shifting nervously, "we already handled that shipment." "What shipment?" "The one Marco approved last week." I frowned. Marco didn't tell me about any shipment. The man shrugged. He said it was routine. I didn't think much of it at the time. Marco handled dozens of deals every week. Still, the feeling stayed in the back of my mind. A small itch. A small question. Then more things started happening. Deals being made without my approval. Meetings I was never invited to. New faces appearing in places where my old allies used to sit. One evening, I walked into a bar we owned downtown. Two of my men were talking quietly near the counter. When they saw me, they stopped. I heard one whisper before the silence fell. Marco said. They didn't finish the sentence. They didn't have to. Something was changing. Something inside the organization was shifting. And slowly, I started noticing something else. People were beginning to look at Marco differently. Not like a brother. Not like an advisor. But like a leader. 3 weeks before the night with the gun, I received a message. A meeting. At one of our warehouses near the river. The strange part. I hadn't called the meeting. I asked one of my captains about it. Who organized this? He hesitated. Then he said something that made my stomach tighten. Marco. I stared at him. And why was I told? He said you already knew. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I nodded slowly. All right, I said, let's see what my brother has planned. The warehouse smelled like dust and oil. It was an old place we used for storage and private discussions. The kind of location where no one asked questions. When I walked inside that night, the first thing I noticed was the silence. Every chair around the long table was filled. My men, my captains, my lieutenants, all of them were already there. But none of them were sitting in the chair at the head of the table. That chair belonged to me. Instead, someone else was sitting there. Marco. He looked calm. Too calm. His hands rested lightly on the table, as if he had been waiting for me. When our eyes met, he smiled. Not the warm smile I remembered from childhood. This one was colder. More confident. More dangerous. Well, he said slowly, look who finally decided to join us. The room stayed quiet. I stepped closer to the table. What's going on, Marco? He leaned back slightly in the chair. This, he said, gesturing around the room, is the future. I glanced at the men around the table. Some avoided my gaze. Others looked nervous. A few looked determined. My chest tightened. You called a meeting without telling me. Marco nodded. Yes. And you're sitting in my chair. Another nod. Yes. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I asked the question that was already forming in my mind. Are you trying to take my empire? Marco didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood up slowly. Then he walked around the table until he stood only a few feet away from me. You built something incredible, he said quietly. His voice carried through the warehouse. Something powerful, something respected. He paused. But the world is changing. I felt my jaw tighten. And Marco looked directly into my eyes. And now it's mine. The room went completely silent. Not a chair moved. Not a single person spoke. And in that silence, I heard something invisible breaking. Loyalty. Everything that happened next felt strangely slow. Marco reached into his jacket. At first, I thought he was going to pull out a document. Or maybe a phone. Instead, he pulled out a pistol. The metal caught the warehouse light as he raised it, and then the barrel pointed directly at my chest. Some of the men shifted in their chairs. Others stared at the floor. No one stopped him. No one spoke for me. That hurt more than the gun. Marco's voice was calm. You had your time. I looked around the room. Faces I had trusted for years. Faces that now refused to meet my eyes. You really think this is how it works? I asked quietly. Marco shrugged. It already worked. His finger rested near the trigger. Most of the organization supports me now. I looked back at him. And the ones who don't. His answer was simple. They will. The gun didn't shake. Marco held it steady. But something else caught my attention. His eyes. They weren't as confident as his voice. There was something there. Something small. Something uncertain. Fear. I spoke slowly. If you pull that trigger, I said, you kill more than just me. He narrowed his eyes. What does that mean? It means you kill the one person who built everything you're trying to take. The room remained silent. I took a small step closer. Some of the men tensed. Marco didn't fire. That told me everything. You want the throne, I continued. That's obvious. Another step forward. But you don't know how to sit on it yet. Marco's jaw tightened. You're wrong. Am I? I gestured around the warehouse. You think they follow you because they believe in you. I shook my head slowly. They follow you because they believe in what I built. For the first time, Marco hesitated. Just a second. But a second is a lifetime when someone is holding a gun. You kill me tonight, I said quietly, and this empire collapses within a year. I could see the thought entering his mind. Doubt. And doubt is poison in a moment like that. You're bluffing, he said. Maybe. Another step forward. But are you willing to bet everything on that? The room felt heavier. Like the air itself was waiting for the next move. Marco's finger was still near the trigger. But he didn't fire. I looked into his eyes. And I saw the truth. He wasn't ready. He wanted power. He wanted control. But deep down, he still wasn't certain he could handle the consequences. That's when I understood something important. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning. Slowly, I stepped past the barrel of the gun. No one stopped me. No one moved. Marco's arm stayed raised, but he didn't turn to follow me. I walked toward the warehouse door. When I reached it, I paused. Then I spoke without turning around. You can have the chair. My voice echoed softly in the building. But remember something. I opened the door. Empires are easier to steal than they are to keep. And then I walked out. Alive. But changed forever. I never went back to that warehouse. And Marco never tried to kill me again. He took the throne just like he wanted. The organization became his. At least officially. But power gained through betrayal always carries a shadow. Because the moment someone betrays their own blood, everyone else knows they might be next. I disappeared from the city for a while. Watched from a distance. Listened to rumors. He struggled. Not immediately. But slowly. Leadership is heavier than ambition. And the throne he wanted so badly turned out to be far more dangerous than he expected. People ask me sometimes if I hate him. My answer is always the same. No. Hate is loud. Hate is emotional. What I feel is something else. Silence. Because betrayal from family doesn't end with revenge. It ends with distance. And silence is the most powerful weapon of all. That was the night my own family turned against me. And it taught me something I will never forget. In the Mafia, enemies are predictable. But family will destroy you when you least expect it. If you enjoyed this story, remember one thing. The underworld is full of secrets. And some of the darkest stories are the ones told by the people who survived them.